Welcome to the All Access Podcast from the experts at Tevis. Each episode, we'll talk about technology topics, trends, or solutions that manufacturers need to know in today's rapidly evolving times. Sit back, enjoy the discussion, and let us know what you think.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the All Access Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Thiessen, and we're coming to you from our studio at Tevis America here in Troy, Michigan. Great to have you here. We have a wonderful episode for you. Hopefully, you're going to enjoy this one. This episode is for you to gain a lot more information and knowledge in order to do your business every single day. Today's topic that we're going to be talking about is Industry 4.0. I know we've heard this buzzword for quite some time already. Some companies have a good understanding and a good handle on what this particular item is and what it does to their industry. Others don't. And this is a multi-layered topic that we're going to be diving into. And I'm very pleased and excited that we have a good friend of ours that's going to be joining us. His name is James Ricci. He's been in the industry for the last 25 years already in the manufacturing and consulting area. Some of the previous roles that he has been involved in was at Grant Thornton, at SAA, Harbor Results to mention here as well. And just lately has been the principal of the 2764 advisors in doing consulting and management consulting there as well. So welcome, James. How are you doing?
Thanks, Michael. Glad I could get on this little episode here with the Tevis team. I'm doing well, enjoying the a little bit more of this post-pandemic opportunities to get back into the manufacturing plants and start making some improvements.
Right. Now, you've been dealing with this kind of topic, I think, for as long as I know you, probably even longer, trying to educate companies, educate individuals on technology-based entities. Is that correct?
Yeah, Industry 4.0, it's got a fancy name. They even made a good interesting history by going back to, Industry 1.0 and 2.0 and 3.0 and tying it back to Henry Ford. But really, manufacturing's had this sort of never-ending reduction in its margin for error, right? And forever and a day, what has manufacturing been focused on? Improving quality, reducing cost, improving lead time. And Industry 4.0 is just really this digital manufacturing transformation, not so much transformation as an enabler to really go after those same, for lack of a better term, age-old problems, is tackling them with a real new set of digital tools. So to me, if I want to be very what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of make it more mundane. It's really just taking and tackling our same old problems, but using the really interesting tools that are now available to us because of a whole variety of new technologies that are now that are out there, that have been out there now for, in some cases, 10 plus years.
Now, I've heard this term Industry 4.0 for the last, I'm going to say 10 years, mostly from our headquarters over in Germany, because it seems like that this Industry 4.0 really had more of an impact over in Europe already quite a bit, where they have been looking into this. Now, over here in the US, we also have that term Internet of Things. Any difference between the Internet of Things in the Industry 4.0, or are they kind of synonyms of each other?
So you're correct that Europe and specifically Germany really bore out this Industry 4.0 kind of concept. And the Internet of Things, IoT, or in this case, really IIoT, the industrial Internet of Things, that's really a building block of Industry 4.0. So if you think about, here are all the things that you hear, right? You hear about additive manufacturing and 3D printing. You hear about augmented and virtual reality, big data, cloud computing, cybersecurity, simulation, right? Robotics, automation, all of these are building blocks as well as Internet IoT for Industry 4.0. So these are tool sets. So again, think about them as, each of them are independent of each other. They can somewhat be implemented separately, but they're all very interconnected to really focus on solving the problems that we always have in manufacturing, right? When you think about it, it's like, what do you deal with day in and day out with your clients, or I deal with my clients with? Improving efficiencies on equipment, right? Improving labor productivity, dealing with less skilled or less experienced or less qualified people, or flat out not having the people, right? First time quality, lead time, making better decisions, being smarter. All of those things are what this is part of. So IoT is really a subset technology tool to kind of do that.
Right. And you've had a lot of the buzzwords, the efficiency, the dealing with your resources, if these resources are machines or these resources are individuals, and how to tackle them. You hit them right on top of it, because when I talk to companies about Industry 4.0, they have somewhat of an understanding of what it does, but when you really nail them down and ask specifically of, do you understand what this does to your environment? They really have, they only touch maybe on one point, and but not on some of the other items that it affects. You had one of the aspects on it, efficiency. Trying to drive efficiency and trying to drive safety and optimizing the processes, that should be one of the key points of what they're trying to accomplish on an every single day perspective. But looking exactly of how you can use technology in order to increase that even further.
Yeah, you're spot on. This isn't like an extra credit assignment that you're like, hey, I'm going to go implement Industry 4.0. You have a business problem, right? You have issues that you're dealing with your business, and technology in many cases, not every case, in many cases, is an element to solving that problem. So I always tell any business owner, I'm not looking for you to do anything different. We simply have, if we're going to create a roadmap to leverage digital manufacturing tools, these things have to have an ROI, and they have to fix problems that you have today, whatever your biggest challenge may be. And so for me, that's sort of where I go. So in the world of like tool and die, for example, you have a very limited labor pools, that's aging. And it's like, whether it's upfront in design, whether it's in programming, whether it's in assembly and tryout, it's a shrinking pool of folks who want to be in it. It's also it's also an aging pool. So that's a problem. There is digital manufacturing tools to help you address those, and allow you to sort of continue to kind of be a viable entity going forward.
Let's stay on that topic, on that aging labor pool, because I think that is very interesting. And to a lot of our listeners, this is an item that potentially keeps them up at night, because our experts that we have currently in the environment, they are potentially gray-haired individuals, have been with the company for the last 20, 30 odd years, and they are now in a position where they potentially are going to be retiring. So what's going to happen now to this environment? I was just recently at a company where, of course, I was talking about our common topics all the time, which is automating their processes and automating the operations. And the common message I got back was, automation, that doesn't really work, blah, blah, blah. And this is what I constantly get back. And when I mentioned to him,
did the individual have a dinosaur roaming in his back parking lot?
but exactly, and that is kind of the point. And I said to him, well, so you are in your 60s, you're probably going to be hitting the golf course anytime soon. So what's going to happen to your knowledge? You're an expert in your field. What's going to happen to it? Are you going to chop your head off and leave it here for future generations to use? And he gave me this look, and he said, actually, That's a good line. I never thought about it that way. But that's the point, right?
Yeah. There's two pieces of that, actually. There's the point you bring up, which is we've got a lot of experts that are approaching retirement. I read an article, don't quote the exact numbers, but 3.6 million experts are approaching retirement, and we have over 7 million unfilled jobs.
Wow.
So, forget about the absolute values. Just assume for the moment we have twice as much openings as people, and people are getting ready to leave the system. And you really need to make sure that before any of those individuals walk out the door, you've institutionalized and passed on that knowledge. And it's not enough to just pass it on to the next generation of people who are in the building. That's absolutely important, but but those people can just pick up and leave and go next door. So it has to be institutionalized into the company through processes and methods and standards that can kind of live on, that sort of perpetuate continuous improvement. And that's the piece that is, people really do struggle with.
Talking about the labor pool and the labor coming into it that potentially do not have the experience and the knowledge in that particular topic. So how are we going to do this? And one entity that we're always getting back to is automating as much as you can, putting your strategies in environments. And this automatically leads to a term that we heard quite often, and this is the term called digital twins. And in this case, I'm going to bring up a little bit Tevis. We've been dealing with digital twins for quite some time now already. Digital twin is just a twin in a digital format of what you have in actuality on your shop floor. If that's your machine, your work holding fixtures, your tooling, all of those things, and really compartmentalizing and standardizing your entire process in a completely digital format. Industry 4.0 that's one of the building blocks to have a digital.
Right. And then the tactical outcomes of that, if you think about it, it's like, oh, okay, if I have this digital twin, how can you can try things out. You can see how the digital world translates into your actual physical world. And how does that work out where you optimize your holders, your feeds and your speeds, your step overs and step downs, and doing all that, what does that result in? That will probably result in having more effective machining programs that run faster, that have higher first-time quality. That's probably pretty important when we've got shrinking lead times for tools specifically, and we don't really have time like we used to do in the past to kind of, fix that machining error that kind of came through, especially from the young guy who really doesn't know what he doesn't know. Setting that person up for success and having something like a digital twin where your experts can manage and optimize that system and then, replicate it in the physical world is a huge, huge advantage for companies.
Everything now is becoming more and more digital. I mean, Internet of Things, as well as Industry 4.0, really dives into making as much as you can digital and smart. And by making it smart, you start at your beginning, at your building block. What is that? Well, design. Go into the design factor now. If I'm designing now a mold or a die, having the capability already to build smarts into that particular part in order to guide and direct the manufacturing sector. If that's utilizing colors that means something to the manufacturing sector, we're going to leave the prints behind. We're no longer dealing about prints. We're all dealing it in a digital format. So having smart designs available in order to increase efficiency and quality, that's key.
Yeah. And we're, it's interesting. I did some work with a company they're an additive company. And that's the interesting thing is when you start with those companies, they start right there. Because additive is such a new technology, effectively the designer becomes the tool maker. They're kind of one and the same person. And so they design and optimize because of this new technology of what additive and 3D printing allows you to do to kind of do things completely different. And I liken it almost like the electric vehicle versus like a Tesla manufacturer versus a traditional manufacturer. They're not laden, they're not bogged down by this legacy, and it's really tough for some of these tool and die companies to do what you're describing because they grew up in a print world. And the 60-year-old guy that you're talking about, when you really sit down and speak to that person, they have gone through tremendous change in the industry, but they really hold on to certain things. And that whole world of, prints and CAD being separate from CAM and is just a world that you can't operate in anymore. It creates too much problems.
I still see that, however, when I see some of the designs that come, that I'm seeing, a lot of them are monochrome, white, gray, and then they still have a PDF file or a print that tells them exactly what is that particular hole. And yeah, that's a tapped hole or that's a pocket where I have a certain tolerance on it. Build these smarts already into it. Use template structures in order to get this. And you mentioned an interesting point that I didn't really think about is with the additive, you kind of merge those two together and this designer has become even the operator for this 3D printing. On the subtractive world, this is actually merging more and more together because in the past you have the designer that's completely just thinking about their designs. Then you had the CAD/CAM operator that was just living in his own world, and then you had the machine operator that was the expert in its true right. And any of those three didn't talk to each other. Now with this industry 4.0, it kind of merges them all together because the design cannot live without the manufacturing, the CAD/CAM operator, and the CAD/CAM operator now utilizes all the tools that the operator used to have, their smarts, inside the software, because I'm having all the step overs and the feeds and speeds built into the tool already. And this is now where the designer needs to really think about, okay, I need to put colors into this model. I need to standardize my processes so that I can drive efficiency and quality downstream. So you merge them all together into one.
Yeah. And it's, the good companies that have already started that process, they really, that process that you talk about when you bring it that tightly together, every rock gets surfaced pretty quickly. And, but under a traditional world where the designer works on the design for 2 to 3 weeks and kicks it over to all the manufacturing, and there's all sorts of issues and it gets kicked back to design, that, you don't have the time and the energy for that anymore. And I've really found that the companies that you've done what you're talking about, and some of them have done it for years, they have done it in a way that their actual total labor hours to produce that upfront portion is actually less because of what you talked about. The only way to make it right is I got to have templates. I've got to have the twins. I've got to do all these other things because to make sure I get the right product out so that the guy at the end of the line, finally, when he starts assembling it, it works. And so they've done a great job with that. And they're like super competitive. I actually did a study. This was a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, but the one company felt like they were uncompetitive up in the upfront CAD kind of design area. We were able to work and compare two different tool shops to each other, and similar tool. Okay, so similar design. It was a, whatever, pick your thing, interior, exterior tool with hidden parting lines, yada, yada, yada. And we found that the one company had half the design hours that the other company had, which is amazing that two companies competing head to head had that much difference in the amount of design hours. But what was more interesting was the work content completed by the company that had half the hours was greater because of what you said. They actually took on responsibilities that the other company considered to be part of CAM, or the CNC operator was being done by the CAD designer, yet their hours were half. How is that possible? Well, it's possible because we've got digital tools that we're using, and we're leveraging what we can, and we're focused on what we can control. And they're using all aspects of whether it's, insert CAD CAM software here, Tebis or whatever. We're taking advantage of every aspect of that to do it right the first time.
Well, and everything, especially in today's world, is time is of the essence. Knowing exactly where you are and what is going on in every company, it all is interlinked, almost like a chain link fence. And if you don't have certain items, you kind of left out. And one of the important things that companies really don't think about. Yes, they think about maybe digital twins. Fine. They have got the templates in place. Great. They've got new machinery. Awesome. But what they forget is their entire process flow is not being maintained. So what am I talking about? They still are running around with their clipboards and trying to figure out where that part is inside their shop. And then every Friday they have an emergency meeting, and then all of a sudden making this one mold or this one die, the hottest thing on the spot of the earth, and put all of the ants of the worker bees onto this in order to make the deadline and make that work, instead of utilizing MES technology, manufacturing execution systems, some kind of a tracking system that can tell them where that particular part is.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because the most companies you go into, and it doesn't matter whether you're tool and die or you're making low volume or high volume widgets, there is that production scheduler, like that person, guy or gal, who kind of just knows how it's like the magical Excel spreadsheet mixed with the clipboard that moves all the chess pieces. And everybody's like, oh, thank goodness so-and-so is here, because boy, if he or she wasn't here, we'd be hosed. And, anytime I hear that just does scream, you need an MES system. And companies today, a lot of them will say, I'm too small for that, James. Like, I'm not whatever, insert big company here. I can't afford that. First off, they're way less expensive than most people realize. They're scaled to the size of your business. And the example I would give is around the requirements for this is, it's like, okay, right now, what's going on? We got the baseball playoffs, right? So think about what's changed in baseball, good or bad, in the last 5 to 7 years. What is that? It's you hear the buzzword analytics, right? And so right now you have, and they'll make fun of it, you've got the geeks up in the office telling the manager how to move the players around on the field for each and every batter and how to pitch to that person. And there's this constant pull with, the manager going with their gut versus what does the data tell you? And I'm not a person who says it's an either or. It's both. So think about an MES like that analytics person. They're bringing data and information to you that you should be able to act upon, because there's so many factors that go on in a plant day to day. There's no way for one person to keep their head around what's going on in the gun drill, what's going on in the 5-axis mill area versus what's going on in the spotting area versus what's been outsourced and how much time is left on this job, and the fact that we had a problem on this job and we got to put it on hold. That is so much for the human brain to try to comprehend. And oh, by the way, they all have lead times and whatever else. That's the advantage of cloud computing and these MES systems, is it has the computing power to crunch all of that and help you make better decisions. It's not replacing people. It's helping people be smarter with their decisions.
Well, and I mean, recently I was at a company where, of course, dealing with the entire MES world through Prolice, and when we've talked to this particular client and showed them all what can be done with resource management and looking at their machines and their job tracking capabilities, their quoting capabilities, figuring out that yes, individual humans have individual talents and some of them are stronger than others. That all goes into the equation when you do your quoting for your particular mold. And really what gives you continuous jobs is making sure that you can have the highest quality, make sure that you can deliver on time, because that's what gives you repeat business. And this company, when we showed them all this, they said, well, so where can I put in that this is now a job where I'm going to put all my resources on it? We said, well, why would you want to do this? If you plan and you recognize that, okay, I'm running into a tight area, all right, I'm going to increase my hours. I'm going to go into overtime. If I realize that a certain part from the supplier is not coming, you can then look at and see, okay, where do I need to ramp up my production in order to still make the deadline? If one of my machine goes down because of technical issues, which other machine can I go to? You know, everybody's talking about this crystal ball. This MES system is not really your crystal ball, but it allows you to look and see, okay, how do I need to utilize my resources better in order to still make time? And your clipboard's not going to do that.
Yeah, that's the piece that there's an element of today with the clipboard, things are getting missed all the time. However, because they've been getting missed forever, people don't realize that they're getting missed. When you move to a new process and a new system, and you know this, it's like that change highlights, well, this is how I used to do this. Like, how do I do this now under this new system? And there's a change. There's a step change there. There's different tools to manage that, but there's also tools in place so that some of those things that you deal with today don't actually ever become a problem. And that's not to suggest that you're never going to have a tool that's going to fall behind schedule and something's not going to happen. I'm not suggesting that. But a lot of things that you're dealing with today, that kind of the hidden factory costs, MES systems, ERP systems address. And then, so that's this sort of piece that it's hard for people to see that part. And this is where this Industry 4.0 sort of, what gets lost in translation is this is a people-driven process. And a lot of times people view it as automation means we're getting rid of people, or, we're going to get rid of people, or we're never going to have people doing any jobs again. And it's like, no, it's making, your smartphone didn't make you disappear. It made you smarter. And you're able to make decisions on the fly, like as in like you're driving with, Google Maps, that like, this isn't the right way to go. I need to go this way, as opposed to waiting 3 miles later and going, oh crap, I'm going the wrong way. I need to turn around. It tells you right away, and you turn around right away. It made you smarter. And that's the piece that I think gets lost in this Industry 4.0 is it makes people smarter at every level, so they make better decisions. So that the person with the clipboard is in fact going to make better decisions with these Industry 4.0 tools than they are with their clipboard.
We're coming out of this pandemic. I'm going to call it post-pandemic that we're at now. But now we're dealing with a short labor market where we have, you mentioned earlier, tons of job openings available. However, they're not being filled. So then companies, of course, they have to look at ways in order to make things more automatic, to look at things to utilize more robotics or more capabilities, not to replace individuals, but in order to aid their production, in order to still keep up. And the technology that we have now, and some people look at it as being a threat to them with this artificial intelligence, the continuous learning of these computers, that it can do some of these things. things that some people really think what you said is a threat to them, that these guys are going to replace. And of course, Hollywood helps a little bit with this when Terminator comes in and saying, yeah, these people are going to be replaced by robots, but that's not the case.
No, it isn't. And if you really watch somebody, an expert, okay, call it a tool maker, and you watch what that person does over the course of 10 hours, and if you were, if you could watch them for a whole day, a whole week, call it 50 hours, and you would break down their tasks of what they do, one of the things you would find is that expert tasks make up a minority share of what they do. And in a lot of cases, the work that they're doing is work that somebody with very little training can perform. So the idea is, what I would want to do is I want my expert to be doing expert stuff because I'm paying them probably at expert wages. So bringing in this younger, I'll call it a less experienced workforce, they're the ones that need to be doing the less experienced work. And we need to then have the expert doing expert work. And then ultimately, through a variety of means, they need to pass that knowledge on to the organization and to the other individuals, so that as they become more experienced, they have a method to get that knowledge. And so you brought up AI as an example, and there's AI tools out there today that can basically, cut training time dramatically for a new, like bring on board a new employee like 40% faster and reduce their training time by like 25%, but also reduce the expert's time, so that they're doing more training, but it requires less direct expert time. And so these type of tools exist, and companies need to take advantage of that, because if those guys walk out the door, man, it is not a good situation. Especially for tooling guys.
We're seeing this already. I mean, over this entire pandemic, some of the experts have left companies because they said, you know what, I'm close to retiring anyways, might as well leave now. And now these companies are in dire straits because they don't have these guys anymore around. Because when we all started in the tool shop, we had, and one of the expert levels guiding us on the way and helping us out. Now you don't have that anymore. These need to be replaced by either AI templates, digital twins, whatever. And there's more and more intelligence that is being built into mold manufacturing and die manufacturing. And of course, when we go digital, we're running into the situation that particular area, the digital world, has to be somehow protected. And what we're running into lately is, and we're hearing this on the news, and it's being not told to us, but we need to protect ourselves. The internet, for the long period of time, is this wide world that everything is, you can do pretty much anything. But now hackers are capable and they're sophisticated to really hack into items, and cybersecurity has become more and more a topic in order to protect themselves, or companies protect themselves from being hacked. Now, companies need to do this. I really advocate that companies need to do this, especially since we're going into this digital world more and more.
Yeah, it's the most recent one in the news, at least from an auto perspective, is Eberspacher. And I'm not sure if I pronounced their name properly, but they're going through that right now. Recently, Honda went through that about a year ago. And, cybersecurity is a building block associated with Industry 4.0. Unfortunately, I view it as it's sort of a chip to get in the game. You kind of have to do it. And that's easy to say, but it's hard to do. But the ramifications of choosing to say, well, the easier answer is we're just going to, we're going to wall ourselves off from the rest of the world isn't an option, because that creates a lot of problems. Illustratively, let's just talk about staying in the tool and die world. I've got my 5-axis mill is having a problem. So DMG, Makino, Parpus, whoever, if they can't remote in to that machine to do diagnostic work, you're going to say, oh no, I need somebody to come here. And that person, again, we've got scarce labor resources that in some cases are not as skilled as they need to be. So you're going to send a somewhat unskilled person to company XYZ to go work on a problem. That's incredibly expensive, not to speak to the fact that your mill is down and that person may not be able to fix it. So that isn't really a good solution to the problem. And so, that cybersecurity piece is a big deal. I'll never say I'm an expert in that part, but getting that part right, because we've been talking about MES. If someone gets in and, kind of stirs the soup of your MES system, you're going to have some problems.
Well, you're in dire hurt. I mean, the heart of a machine is your controller, and it's a computer to the machine. And if somebody is able to hack into these machines and change the base item of this, it could have ramifications that, this machine is down, the company cannot produce. And of course, if they're doing any kind of essential work, or if that's not even essential work, but everyday work, it could interrupt everything. And so cybersecurity and I recently was at an AMBA event, and the speaker at that event really is talking about that in today's society, if you've not yet done two-factor verification of securing your entities of your computers and stuff like that, and protecting yourself from being hacked, you have to think about these things right now. It's not only going to happen to the large companies. These things are happening even on a small scale level. It's a scary world nowadays out there.
Yeah, it is. And and a lot of people, I think, are probably selling on that fear. The piece that you've got to be really careful about is, to your point, like, unfortunately, that's risk insurance. So for me, when I go in and we're going to go, okay, we're going to develop an Industry 4.0 roadmap. We talked at the beginning of this conversation that we need an ROI for this thing. And it's and it should have no problem. It's got to solve a business problem. But make no mistake, in your business, you pay insurance for all sorts of stuff. And cybersecurity is critical insurance that you need to have. And you got to buy the right stuff. There's down the road from actually where I live, there's an aerospace company, and they had a whole issue that I was talking to a colleague about, where they basically machined a part wrong. And it turned out the CAM and the CAD programs didn't match, or the CAM program was not matched to the latest rev level of the CAD. And when you start talking to the person, they're like, oh, for cybersecurity reasons, we've completely separated CAD and CAM. And I'm like, what? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, why would you do that? That doesn't actually solve your cybersecurity problem. So now you have somebody who's actually making their business harder to function and more prone to quality errors, and they've done nothing from a risk mitigation perspective to actually make themselves any safer. So you got to be really smart about what you're doing and what you're paying for, because there's real costs that you put into your business if you do this wrong.
I mean, this entire world of Industry 4.0, and I'm going to really call it a world, but it is so huge. Now, obviously, listeners and companies that are dealing with these topics right now, they're overwhelmed. And there's one thing that I've learned, and you've mentioned this multiple times to me, and it's stuck in my head. It's start small, think big. Start on a small level. Think what you can change today in order to have a big impact down the road. And don't do everything at once, but start with this.
Doing nothing is not an option. That's a decision that you make. You're kicking the can down the road. But every day that you do that, you're rapidly becoming less efficient compared to your competitors who are doing these things. And then, I made the joke about, the dinosaur roaming in your backyard. I mean, suddenly you're quoting at a shop rate with a certain number of labor hours that just is not competitive, and you won't win work. And you're like, how in the world is somebody winning that work at that level? And it's like, because they take less time to machine it and assemble it now and design it than you do. So my point being, you got to work all the way backwards and say, okay, what's your business plan? What are you trying to get accomplished? And then to your point, think big. Like, what could this be with all of these tools? But let's start with something that's very, very manageable. And it's something that's going to solve a today problem. And you should be able to get momentum if you're fixing a today problem.
What companies are today still thinking about, and it's a term that I'm hearing all over the place. Why fix something that ain't broken? Well, you can't look at it that way. Yes, it's not broken, but it's outdated. And if you don't increase those capabilities, then very soon you're going to be outdated and you're being left behind. So if you don't start with, you mentioned a very simple item that a company can do today is just create templates, create automation, instill those ideas and the experience from these soon-to-be retired individuals that have an incredible wealth of knowledge into your company so that you're prepared when you have new labor people coming in, these new individuals come in, that they're being helped out so your company is not going to be a dinosaur here in the next little bit.
Well, I mean, again, I'll use the analogy because it happens over time. So let's go back to another sports analogy with basketball. I'm not even a huge basketball fan, but think about the advent of the shooting 3-pointers. Everybody shoots 3-pointers now. You hear the term in basketball, small ball, all the small, fast guys out on the floor. The game has changed. So if you go back 10 years ago in the NBA, they still had the big, huge center guy, and they had the defensive guy that couldn't shoot. That is not basketball today. You could have a team like that in the NBA, and you might make the playoffs, but you're not going to win. It's changed. So to your point, it wasn't broken, but there's something better now. And so that's something better. You kind of need to adopt some of that, or you're going to become very uncompetitive very quickly. I mean, it doesn't take long in the NBA to go, you could be knocking down 2-point shots all day long at a 50%, 55% clip, but do the math. And if you're hitting 3-pointers at 40%, you don't need to make as many shots, but you're going to blow the other team out of the water on a score basis by the time the fourth quarter rolls around. So that's the kind of the mindset that somebody has to have, is just because this is the way we've always done it, that isn't the way we always need to keep doing it.
We got to think smarter. That's all we need to do. Just think smarter. We've now gone through, in our time, at least here together, we covered such a wider range. We started with talking about efficiency and how to optimize, how to automate their processes. We talked about MES solutions. We talked about how digitalization with digital twins can impact their daily lives. Cybersecurity. I mean, this Industry 4.0 is such a huge deal that companies really need to start fast. If you have not thought into this, if you have not done anything to this, I urge you, do this now. Start thinking about this. Get with companies that can really guide you in that directions. If that is Harbor Results, if that is James over here, that can really help you with that entire aspect, or even the folks at Tebis, talk to them. They can guide you in there.
Yeah, my thing with that is, because you're spot on, Michael. It's, you got to start somewhere, and it's, the idea is focus on something that you can control. Because right now the supply chain is a mess. That's really hard to deal with. Labor is very difficult. So under the assumption that you're going to really struggle to have labor, focus on what you can control, and then look at these tools as an enabler to kind of fixing problems in your business that you can control today. No one, like back to your one example, no one's stopping you from optimizing holders, feed speed, step overs, step downs. Like that's all stuff you can do today that is irrespective of all those other outside factors and your customers putting jobs on hold and everything else. You can still do that. So find those things and help yourself today. That's going to, pay dividends, 2, 3, 6, 5, 7 months down the road, and just, keep kind of being an annuity of benefit to the organization.
Well, James, I really appreciate that you came on the All Access podcast, and it's always a pleasure talking to you and bringing some very interesting topics to light. Any final thoughts or any guidance that you could give to some of these mold and die makers that are listening to us right now? Any final thoughts? I'm
going to stick with you stole my thunder there with the think big, start small, ultimately prove value, demonstrate to yourself and your organization that there's a benefit from doing this. And then the last piece that we didn't say was scale fast. So take it and go, where else does this apply within our organization where we can garner a operational benefit, and let's go after it. This is not an IT implementation project. Industry 4.0 is really more about digital manufacturing transformation and leveraging those tools. So think about it that way. But I just can't stress enough, you got to get started now. You can't wait.
Awesome. James, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. Again, it's always a pleasure to have you on. So thank you for joining.
Thank you, Michael. I enjoyed it very much.
Well, all the listeners out there, if there's one more thing that I can say to you, and I'm going to repeat what James said here earlier, think big, start small, and then the last factor is start scaling this thing up and really get going on this. I cannot stress this enough. Start. Think about what you need to do in order to make sure that tomorrow you can still continue with your highest efficiency, with the highest quality, and really make the manufacturing sector over here in our US or in Canada, wherever you listen to, make sure that we are on the front lines and making sure that tomorrow that our workers have a job and can produce high quality parts. From my side here, thank you for listening. Hopefully I will see you next time again in one of our next episodes. So thank you again and see you guys later.
Thank you for joining this episode of All Access. Please leave a comment or review with your feedback or what you'd like to hear in future episodes. To learn more about manufacturing technology solutions and Tebis's capabilities, visit our website at Tebis. That's TEBIS.com.